Hey, good afternoon. Gabe DeArmond here on YouTube, the PowerMizzou.com channel, and this is the 573 report because it's Wednesday and that's what we do on Wednesdays. The 573 report is brought to you every week by 573 Tees. That is a local company here in Columbia, Missouri. You can get Mizzou gear, Cardinals gear. I hear they're doing well, maybe better than Mizzou. We'll talk about that in a minute. Eli Drinkwitz gear, pretty much anything you want. Columbia-related, Missouri-related. Check them out at 573tees.com or in person. They are in Alley A, just off 9th Street in Columbia, Missouri. They are there about 6.5 days a week, I believe. So go pay them a visit, get outfitted for this weekend's game or any other weekend's game. 573tees.com is where you can check them out. And now we are going to bring into the show Mitchell Forde, who hopefully has some things to talk about because I haven't really prepared a whole lot. So, Mitch, what do you got, man?
I mean, we don't excel in preparing for this show.
Sure.
It's just one of those things.
Right.
Maybe someone will have a comment or two. I don't know. I can talk a little bit about the press conferences yesterday, a little bit about Tennessee, although we were both just saying before we started that neither of us has actually watched Tennessee play a snap this season. So, Steve Wilkes did joke with us yesterday. I'm sure we watch a lot of film. And I was like, my excuse is that obviously I don't have access to all 22. Otherwise, I would.
Right. That was a rare, lighthearted comment in what was not a particularly cheery Steve Wilkes press conference. We will get to that briefly, but nobody told me when I started doing internet TV that I was supposed to prepare for it. So I guess,
there's really not many rules in internet TV.
Fortunately, so. Yeah. So before we talk Steve Wilkes, let's look. Here's my goal for this show. Maybe we can match the energy of Eli Drinkwitz at his press conference because we've been covering him for about a year and a half now, and he was as positive and upbeat and happy as I think I've seen him. And I don't want to say that was fake happiness because that would be, not really a fair thing to say, but it very much struck me as a guy who came into the press conference saying, I'm going to be very upbeat and I'm going to be agreeable. And even like the questions that were somewhat critical, he was basically agreeing with even before he started to answer them.
Yeah, I think probably his thought was, I think people are obviously disappointed from that Boston College game. And I want to show that, to the team and the fan base that this isn't the end of the world, that, it hurt. And he was fairly despondent after that game on Saturday. I mean, it was pretty clear that one hurt. And so, that hurt to lose by a touchdown in overtime on an interception, but we're moving on. I'm not throwing anyone under the bus. We're not going in different directions. There's no offense versus defense feud, even though there maybe could be. I mean, like no one would blame anyone if it was on that. And I'm going to take the blame on myself and we're going to move forward. I think that was kind of the message he pretty clearly wanted to convey.
Yeah, well, I thought last night, who says there's no pointing fingers? The people who have reason to point fingers. I mean, that's, yes. You don't need to point that out if both sides are playing well. But he did say on to Tennessee at least 2, maybe 3 times in that press conference. It was un-Belichick-like in the way he said it, though.
Yeah, he wasn't quite as grouchy. He didn't just snarl at us. He did actually answer our questions.
Right. It would be different. And it answered them like beyond what I expected going in. I mean, he was asked about, his timeout usage. And at that point, like in the press conference, he was so honest and so happy to answer everything that I just started asking questions that I was like, well, hey, I'll take a shot. Maybe he'll answer this. And I asked him about not using Tyler Beatty on the last drive of 2 games and about Trajan Jeffcoat, who he gave the very politically correct answer about Trajan Jeffcoat, which is to say he did not say, I don't really know where he's been for the last 3 weeks of the season. But I figured, hey, take a shot because he's answering everything else. Why not?
Yeah, the clock management responses were really good, and unlike what you would hear from a normal coach. So if anyone out there watching hasn't read my notebook from this morning, got a few different nuggets in there, but I thought that was definitely worthy of inclusion. If you were wondering about the strategy that went into the timeout usage, both at the end of the first and second half on Saturday, it's in there.
And the timeout stuff at the end of that BC game, like, we can bitch all we want, but they got to overtime. Like, what he did, regardless of anything else, what he did worked.
Yes. No, yeah, I think that's more so, it's something that gets talked about after every game. But yeah, it's just, one of those things, we lost, so I'm just going to find everything to complain about. But yeah, no, it did not end up impacting the outcome.
Yeah. So I want to put up a question here, and I want to use it kind of to get into a discussion. Scott Fitz says, does Mizzou need to win 3 of the next 4 to have a good season? So the next 3 I know are Tennessee, North Texas, A&M. What's immediately after A&M? Because I know they have a bye week.
I think it's Vanderbilt. In which case,
that's right.
The answer would be yes.
Yes. So they have basically in the next 4, they have 2 guaranteed wins, right? The 2 guaranteed wins left on the schedule, and I use that term loosely, are North Texas and Vanderbilt. So basically, do you have to either beat A&M or Tennessee to have a good season? And before we get to that, I wanted to kind of use this as a way to jump into, somebody asked me a question today about considering that they're playing poorly. And I said, well, I'm not sure they're playing poorly. I mean, they were a 5-point underdog and lost by 7. And then they were a 1-point favorite and lost in overtime. They're playing almost exactly as expected. The problem is expected by Vegas and emotionally neutral people is not necessarily the same as expected by fans.
Right. And also, as we've touched about on here before, they've been playing, I don't think they've been playing poorly, but because of 1 or 2 key plays, the results haven't been what you wanted. I mean, like, if, Saturday's game goes the other way and Mizzou ends up winning that game, I mean, you could point to any one play where that can change that. You don't probably have people saying, oh, Mizzou's playing poorly, this team is a disappointment. It's like, it just shows the margin. So, yeah, I think that the results haven't been what you wanted. The defense hasn't been as good as you expected, but I don't think you can say, like, oh, I'm stunned at how bad this team has been playing.
I think most people would have said at the beginning of the season through 4 games, probably 3-1, right? They are 2-2, and they're 2 plays from 4-0. Like, I think if you look at it, I mean, they probably should have won the Boston College game. I don't think anybody can say they should have won the Kentucky game.
Yeah, I mean, the Kentucky game, the better team definitely won, but Mizzou gave itself a chance. The Boston College game, yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, I kind of feel like on that day, Boston College was more meant to win. I mean, like, the environment was good, and Mizzou just, made more mistakes, right? They lost the turnover margin. They, couldn't tackle. I think that if those teams, like you've said before, though, if those teams played, a 10-game home and home alternating series, that each one wins 5.
Yeah, so they're maybe a little bit behind where you wanted. Well, they're certainly behind where people wanted them to be. Maybe a little bit behind where they should be. But to me now, it's just kind of get to a bowl game. I mean, that's the goal.
Yeah, and circling back to Scott's question, I don't think right now, like we've just said, I don't think right now I'm going to go out and say, like, oh, yeah, this has been a bad season. They've been underwhelming. If they lose to Tennessee, you start to have that conversation a little bit. And by no means does it become like fire anyone or panic. It just becomes like, oh, yeah, okay, we need to recalibrate where this team is in the rebuild.
Yeah, and again, we talked about this on Monday. I mean, it is exacerbated by the fact that Barry Odom and Trey Williams are key parts in a top 10 team. And that's why I think this game is so big, because if you lose to Tennessee, I mean, then you're looking at Josh Heupel in year 1 versus Eli Drinkwitz in year 2, and he comes into Columbia and wins. And then you start to look at, hang on, is Missouri ahead of anybody except South Carolina and Vanderbilt in the East?
Yeah, that's true. And I do think we tend to compare too much. I mean, like everyone wants to say, like, oh, look what this coach is doing in this situation. Look what this coach is doing in this situation. And like none of these situations are the same. I mean, like just the talent is different at Arkansas than it was at Missouri. And, things are different at Tennessee. I mean, like they did get right in the transfer portal, but they've been recruiting a lot better than it had been here. And you could say, I'm sure there are other ways in which, Eli Drinkwitz maybe took over a better situation than like, say, Mike Norvell or whatever. Although objectively, I mean, that's a disaster. I'm not trying to defend him. I will not die on that hill. But what I'm trying to say is like, and Eli Drinkwitz has touched on this a few times this season, like, be careful about the whole game of like comparing where you're at versus everyone else every week because it can change so often and not every situation is the same.
And that does make sense, but the reality is you're going to be compared to the teams in your division, and
sure.
You're behind Kentucky. You don't want to be behind Tennessee as well. So this another comment gives us a chance for me to jump on a soapbox for a minute. And Garrett, who is, I mean, I give Garrett credit. He has committed to the bit. He has been anti-Connor Basilak for a year and a half now. But says, I'm stunned there are still Basilak apologists. I mean, Connor Basilak is not a perfect quarterback, but I don't see how you could watch this team and say, all right, I'm going to list off the top 10 problems with this team, and Connor Basilak is in there, much less like the top 1 or 2.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's the phenomenon you touched on earlier in the week with, when you've got a team that has an issue that's so glaring like Missouri's defense, you expect that to be bad, and then you get mad at the other parts when they can't overcome it. And like I get that it probably gets a little bit frustrating to watch Connor Basilak, dump the ball off and take what the defense gives him all day, but he does a really good job at it. I mean, it's not like he's putting up bad numbers because he can't throw downfield. And like he's thrown for over 300 yards, 3 times this season, all 4 games this season. I mean, he's thrown 10 touchdowns, something like that. I mean, he's had a solid season. He got Mizzou down the field, to with a chance against Kentucky. He got Mizzou back from a 10-point deficit, and then got them to overtime against Boston College. Like, I don't know. Those things, like, I think that's above average quarterback play in those instances.
Well, and what I don't really understand is we finally moved to a point where we understand that wins for a starting pitcher is stupid because it's well beyond his control. So why do we keep track of the record for a quarterback? I mean, do we keep track of a strong safeties record or a left guard's record? Like what's Xavier Delgado's record as a starter? Could you tell me?
I could not. No.
I mean, I assume it's the same as Connor Basilak's, basically. But I mean, that's my point. It is people involved in football will take ridiculous pride in telling you this is the ultimate team game, right? If we have 22 guys and if 21 of them do their job, it's not going to work. We're going to get beat. But we judge one guy on what the result is, and on Saturday, the only players that I would say were definitively better on Missouri's team than Connor Basilak were Harrison Mevis and Sean Ketting. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, Grant McKinnis had a couple nice punts, and he got that penalty, so we'll throw him in there. All the kickers, giving the kickers some love. I mean, I agree. And I think a couple things. I mean, one, obviously, the quarterback touches the ball every play. Like, if anyone notices the left guard, it's because he's, like, really bad. And while you mentioned that, coaches and people around football take pride in it being a team game, they also talk all the time about winning's the only stat we care about. Our quarterback's a winner, blah, blah, blah. So I think that does get kind of, makes that get put out there. But, yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that, if Missouri's defense gets that stop at the end of the fourth quarter like they did against LSU last year, no one is having these conversations about Connor Basilak. He may be, in the running for SEC offensive player of the week because obviously he doesn't have that second interception. I don't know what anyone else actually did, but he had a solid game.
Well, and the crazy part is if Missouri gets that defensive stop, it actually takes away the best thing Connor Basilak did in that game, which is lead them 40 yards downfield for a tying field goal, and still nobody is criticizing him. It's I don't know. Whatever. I understand everybody's, but like I got 3 questions in my mailbag this week about Brady Cook and Tyler Macon. And look, I mean, if that's the road you want to go down, you don't want to have a grown-up conversation about football, because Connor Basilak is not the reason this team is losing games. So we got a couple other questions in here. John wants to know, how is the Wilkes hire any different than the Cross hire by Barry Odom? At least Barry panicked and turned it around. Look, I don't know if the Steve Wilkes hire is going to work or not. I mean, I had some questions when it was made. It seemed a little bit weird and a little bit out of left field to me. By the way, we got a dislike vote on the show, so I guess somebody didn't like our Connor Basilak discussion. But
that's fine. You all can disagree.
Yeah, but don't dislike the show, man. Like, just tell us you think we suck. Don't hit the thumbs down button. That does bad things on YouTube's algorithm. But I mean, it's a little early to decide that Steve Wilkes is not good enough and can't get the job done, right?
Yes.
I mean,
Totally agree.
We got to wait till at least week 5. We're only in week 4.
So I wanted to actually first circle back to one thing about the backup quarterback thing, and that's just that overall, and you see it more with quarterback than any other position, but overall I've seen quite a few people act like, oh, well, this season's already kind of lost. Like, let's just throw the young guys out there and see what they could do. And I do understand that when you get to the point where it's like, oh gosh, we're playing for 6-6 and the Independence Bowl, like no one's going to get that excited about the season, but like, acting like the season is over when you're 2-2 is insane. I mean, if a coach actually did that, his whole team would transfer.
I mean,
so that's just not going to happen.
At what point in this season was Missouri realistically playing for something better than the Music City Bowl?
Right, exactly.
Ever?
And if you thought they were playing for the SEC East before, why not still think that, because they're still mathematically alive. So anyway, just wanted to get that out there. But yeah, I mean, I think that, I don't want to give Steve Wilkes a total free pass, because, while I do think the issue is mostly talent, Mizzou should not be last in the country in run defense. Correct. It should not. It should not be whatever it is in 1/16th or whatever in total defense. Like, it should be better than that. But I still think the root of the issues are talent-based. And I also do think that, a team that's running a new scheme is just always going to get better as the year goes on. And now you would have hoped that it started from a spot other than, as bad as possible. But like, I remember we even had someone tell us before the season, like, you might look up in, week 7, 8, 9 or whatever and be like, oh, this defense is not bad. They're starting to click. So I think that, like you said, I'm not saying he's going to be around forever. I'm not saying it's going to work here. I'm not absolving him of blame. I'm just saying, like, it would be very premature to start getting the pitchforks out.
But yeah, the hope is in week 7, 8, and 9, we are saying that, because I think the discouraging part is there's no reason to say they're getting better. Like, this defense was no better at Boston College than it was against Central Michigan.
No, you're 100% right. And I definitely understand why that is concerning. I mean, you watched another team just line up and pound the ball down the middle every single play. Yeah, I mean, like, that is definitely cause for alarm. I get it. I just think that I can't imagine they're going to end up last in the country in run defense. Right. I think that, they'll probably get run over by Georgia. Yeah, maybe even by Texas A&M and Florida, but like, they're going to, I think they'll figure out enough to be competitive with the other teams on the schedule.
Well, and I think the interesting thing I thought out of what Drinkwitz said on Tuesday was he kept talking about, the main problem was communication, and he took the blame for that, and whatever, whether that's his fault or not, I don't really care. But what that tells me is everybody who's been saying, I look at them and they look like they don't know where to line up and they don't know what they need to do. I mean, basically, that's what Drinkwitz was saying. Our issue is we need to figure out where we need to be and what we need to do on every snap. And, I mean, that is concerning. And whether that's Steve Wilkes' fault or the player's fault or Eli Drinkwitz's fault or your fault, I don't really know. But, I mean, you've been working on this system since March. If you haven't figured out by now where to stand, then there are probably some issues beyond just they need better players.
Yeah, I feel like it's not my fault. I mean, I hope not. I can't imagine how it would be, although it would be kind of wild if, like, next week Steve Wilkes just came out there and started yelling at me.
It's not out of the question.
No. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, I wasn't meant, with my previous answer to just be, like, peddling sunshine about this defense and saying they're going to get it turned around. I don't expect it's ever going to be good this season.
Yeah.
I do think it probably can improve a bit. But yes, that is, it would be one thing if it's just guys getting blocked, and that is, I think, a big part of it. But the talk about communication and knowing assignments is definitely a little bit troubling.
Yeah. All right. So now my concern is with the defensive line coach. Do you think Coach Franklin could be in jeopardy of getting fired? Look, I'm going to take great exception with Jethro Franklin being in trouble. He's my favorite assistant. I just watched his videos in camp, and I love him. So, I think he's doing a phenomenal job, regardless of whether the defense is good or not.
Yeah, Poon Chun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, his unit hasn't been great for sure, but one, I still don't really know how much to put on in D-line versus second level versus, defensive coordinator and all these different things. Like, clearly none of them are great, but I don't know really where we should put the majority of the blame. And two, I just still can't imagine, a coaching staff hiring someone knowing, like, okay, the talent level's probably not where we want to be, and then saying, well, the results still aren't where we want to be, even though we don't have the talent, you're fired. Like, it could happen, and it does happen occasionally with position coaches especially, but it would just surprise me.
If you fire a position coach after 1 year, like not even mid-season, if he fires Steve Wilkes or Jethro Franklin, or are those the only two new coaches? I feel like I'm missing one maybe.
Fletcher in the
Aaron
secondary.
Fletcher.
I
Right.
don't think he's got as much heat.
Right. So if he were to fire one of these coaches after this season, that's on him. That means he made a bad hire and he screwed up, and he is scapegoating a guy on his staff for the mistake he made. And, I just, I don't want to let the fans get away with, well, I'm going to blame Jethro Franklin, but Eli Drinkwitz is still football Jesus. It doesn't work that way. He's the one that fired Ryan Walter, fired, whatever, however you term that. But he's the one that let Ryan Walters go. He's the one that let Brick Haley go. So if this doesn't work, that's on Eli Drinkwitz. And it's disingenuous to say, I still believe in him, but that defensive line coach sure isn't any good. That doesn't work with me.
Yeah, and I mean, at a certain point, you definitely don't want a coach to just to say, like, well, I can't fire this guy because I hired him, so it might look bad at me, but it's not working, so I'm just going to blindly stick with him. I mean, that's not a great solution either. But yes, I agree. You can't give Drinkwitz a total pass if you're that upset with the defense that you want heads to roll.
Yeah. So Colby is asking any updates on when they'll start the indoor facility. I don't know.
I kind of think they've already started doing something, not maybe surveying, or I don't really know.
I mean,
I don't think it'll be ready for at least a year.
Right. Once we get into the season, kind of all those other things, these are off-season things. And don't get me wrong, I drive up and down Providence every day. If at some point I drive up there and suddenly the Divine Pavilion is not there, I'll report that. But, we don't really know. All right. Colby also wants to know over-under on how many 3-and-outs for Tennessee this weekend. I mean, I don't know. Let's set it at 2.5. I feel like that's a fair number that would get some bets on both sides.
That's fair. Yeah. I mean, you got to think they'll have more drives than Boston College, and Boston College had 2, so I'd probably take the over. I mean, Boston College only had, I think, 10 possessions or something like that. Tennessee will have more than that. But yeah, I don't know. That's still a fair number. I
mean, do you know the over/under on this game off the top of your head?
I don't know. I'm tempted to look that up. That's that I would take the over.
Right, I would take the over almost no matter what it is, and I'm looking it up right now. But I mean, all this talk about, hey, what kind of stress is Josh Heupel's offense going to put on your defense? I mean, it's going to put the same amount of stress on Tennessee's defense that it puts on Missouri's defense. We've seen this in person. We know what the pratfalls are here. And the over-under, by the way, is 65, which seems low to me.
Yeah, it does seem a little low. So I was asking one of the players we were interviewing yesterday, like on defense, do you prefer going up against like a super high tempo team like Tennessee or like a team like Boston College that keeps you on the field forever? And he gave the, politically correct answer of like, oh, I don't really care. But then Barrett Bannister chimed in and was like, I can tell you what I like. I like the one that gets us back on the field quickly. And I started thinking about it and I was like, yeah, I actually do think Mizzou is better suited to a game where both teams get a lot of possessions because they can't stop the other team no matter what. So at least if you give their offense more time to score and don't keep them off the field for, 10 minutes at a time, they've got more of a chance.
Yeah. And look, I think, this is a really interesting weekend to me because Josh Heupel brings in a team that they look better than Tennessee looked last year, but by no means is this a great program right now. I mean, they've got some issues there. I mean, their leading tackler is a converted running back, I think, and this is not a great team coming in. This is the first one that if Missouri loses it, I'm kind of going to think, you really probably lost to a team you shouldn't have lost to.
Agreed. I think the talent level was fairly similar between Mizzou and Kentucky and Mizzou and Boston College, and Kentucky probably had an edge over Missouri.
Yeah.
But I think if in this one, if they lose, it would be like, well, you got out schemed, you got out gimmicked, by Heupel's deal. I could be wrong. I have not, like I said earlier, I've not actually watched Tennessee play this season, so you should probably really ignore everything I say. But yeah, I do.
But
agree.
we know what a Josh Heupel offense looks like. I mean,
exactly. Yeah, I think a big key for Missouri is like, yes, they're going to score and they're going to put points on the board. I think if you can create just enough like timely negative plays, like we saw last week when Mizzou was able to get 3 out, they got a first down stop and then they blitzed and caused an incompletion and put them in 3rd and long or whatever. If they can do that just enough, I like their chances because then you put Tennessee in that position where they have one of those 17-second 3-and-outs, right. And you can control the ball a little more with your offense.
And it truly is. It's one play on defense, and it's the first down play because I mean the difference between even something as simple as a 3-yard run that puts you in 2nd and 7 versus a 2-yard loss that puts you in 2nd and 12, it changes absolutely everything. And it's why if I'm facing Missouri, any offensive coordinator that throws the ball on first down should immediately be fired. Like before the next series should be fired because Missouri has proven no ability to put you in 2nd and 12 if you just hand the ball off and run up the middle.
I'm a huge fan of us saying, like, yeah, no, Steve Wilkes shouldn't be fired. Jethro Franklin shouldn't be fired. But at one bad play call, you're gone.
But I mean, it's so, like, it's not some complex thing. They are giving up literally 270 yards a game on the ground. Why would you ever throw on first down?
I agree. I'm just saying that was a funny dichotomy there.
I mean, I don't know. Fire Steve Wilkes too if you want. It's fine with me. I have an issue with watching offensive coaches trying to outsmart themselves when you don't really have to. All you've got to do against this team right now is hand the ball off until they prove that they can actually stop you doing it. All right, so I mean, this is kind of the theme of the week. We're going to continue on the defense. John wants to know, except for Bolton, why is the defensive talent so much lower? And, like, that's a fair question. I feel like we are erring a little too much on, well, they just don't have enough guys. I mean, like you said, it's okay that they're not great, but it's not really okay that they're this bad.
Yeah, I would say a couple things. One, I don't think the talent is that much lower than it was during the end of last season. I mean, the end of last season, they were getting torched. Bolton was hurt. They had a few guys out with, contact tracing and injuries, and the defense was terrible. And everyone was like, oh, my gosh, Ryan Walters is the worst coordinator ever. And I did try to say, I tried to say, like, he's playing quarterbacks and wide receivers in the defensive backfield. He's playing Drake Heismeyer, a defensive tackle.
By the way, that quarterback is like their second best DB right now. So
yeah, by the way, both of those two guys now start.
Right.
So clearly they didn't exactly address those issues over the offseason. But yeah, I mean, like, I don't think it's all that much lower. They did lose Tyree Gillespie and Josh Bledsoe and Trey Williams, who are obviously, I think it's fair to say the replacements haven't been as good other than maybe Carlisle's for Gillespie, although he lacks probably the consistency. But yeah, I think my answer would be I don't think it's all that much lower than it was last season. That's maybe a little bit problematic, and because it shows the guys you got out of the transfer portal and out of the junior college ranks are really not panning out.
And it shows that some of the guys, like, this is my problem all the time, and it's not just football. It's every sport. Every fan of a team just assumes that every player on their team is going to get better every year. Progress is not linear. Trajan Jeffcoat is not guaranteed to be a better player this year than he was last year. Oh, by the way, he's worse right now. Kobe Whiteside is a worse player than he was 2 years ago. I mean, I'm not talking, I don't know, I don't see day to day, but production-wise, worse player. Devin Nicholson is a worse player than he was last year playing next to Nick Bolton. I mean, I would argue maybe Ennis Rakestraw has been worse than he was last year. Like, so we just go into a season saying, okay, well, we've got 7 guys coming back, and they're all 7 automatically better. Well, that's faulty logic on our part. That's not true. It's never been true.
Right. And like you talk about, the 6th year, 5th year seniors, the COVID year guys, like every team's bringing back those guys. And some of them are, I mean, like the ones Arkansas brought back, I guess, are better than the ones Missouri brought back. Like it doesn't guarantee, it's not like something that's a unique advantage to Missouri.
Yeah, so I don't know. We spent 35 minutes. Did we solve Missouri's defense? Did that happen?
We probably made everyone feel worse. We said, yeah, it's pretty bad. They're not very talented, but they're also not going to fire the guys you want to fire. So get used to it.
I mean, I did not see a comment from Steve Wilkes, so he is apparently not taking our suggestions on this show.
He should be at practice. I would guess he's at practice right now. So
yeah,
I'm sure he'll catch up later. That he's an avid viewer.
Right. Seems like a better use of his time to be at practice, but we do put these up on replay. So hey, Steve, catch up later, man. Shout us out. Give us a like on YouTube. Tweet us. It'll all work out. So,
Shop all right. 573Ts.
Exactly. So, I don't know, Mitch. We'll see you in about an hour and a half, and we'll sit in the media room for an hour and a half after that.
Oh, yeah. Can't wait.
All right. We're going to let Mitch go. I want to remind you one more time, he gave you the pre-tees, but please do shop at 573 Tees. You can find them downtown Columbia in a physical location on Alley A, just between 9th and 10th Street, or you can find them online at 573tees.com. No better time, by the way, to get your thicker kicker merchandise from 573 Tees. Harrison Mevis, the momentary hero of last week's game, didn't turn out for him, but they do some stuff with individual Missouri players. They also do a lot of team stuff. They've been a partner of ours for a couple years now, and just ask you guys to, hey, if you want some Mizzou gear, if you want something to you want a t-shirt to wear, go give them a shot. Check out their site first, 573tees.com. If they don't have what you want, hey, go somewhere else, but I think you'll probably be able to find what you want. And they do a lot of custom stuff. They've done some Power Mizzou stuff. Check that out at 573tees.com/collection/Power Mizzou. You could buy a site t-shirt and rep us out in public, and we would greatly appreciate that. We appreciate you watching. Before you log off, do hit that like button. Hit the subscribe button on the channel. We'll put the podcast up here in the next half hour or so. If you're listening on the podcast, please give the podcast a 5-star review and tell everyone how wonderful it was. And join us tomorrow when we're going to talk to Brent Hubbs of VolQuest.com and preview the Tennessee Volunteers. And then on Friday afternoon, we will have a special guest, a familiar face on our Master Tech Picks show on Friday afternoon. So thanks for hanging out with us, and we will catch up later on.